Welcome back to another explainer. So, we've all seen the highlight reels, right? We know exactly who lifted the golden trophies, who went home in tears, and which goals are played on repeat every 4 years. But what if we look past those highlight reels and our own personal biases? Is it actually possible to mathematically prove which World Cup victories were the absolute hardest survival stories to achieve? Well, today, we're going to answer exactly that.
Look, when we ask if some World Cup wins are harder than others, we aren't just talking about getting a lucky bounce of the ball or a controversial refereeing decision. No, we are talking about mountains so steep they should have been fundamentally impossible to climb. We're looking for the greatest survival stories ever told on a pitch, where the odds were just so heavily stacked against a team that pure talent alone couldn't have saved them.
Okay, so let's dive into this brilliant detective tool we're using today. It relies on something called the ODR formula, which stands for the overall difficulty of the triumph. It uses ELO ratings. Now, if you aren't familiar, think of ELO kind of like a video game ranking that tracks your true skill level over time, based on every single match you've ever played. Our formula takes the combined strength of the entire tournament, plus the strength of every specific opponent a team faced, and then subtracts the winner's own rating. Essentially, this massively rewards mid-tier teams that somehow manage to slay a bunch of absolute giants in heavily stacked tournaments. It's basically the ultimate mathematical lie detector for seeing who truly earned their gold.
All right, kicking off our countdown at number 5, we have the infamous Italian triumph of 1982. A victory born out of a complete and utter mess.
Now, what's really interesting here is the absurd contrast in their run. In the first group stage, Italy actually became the first team to eventually win a World Cup without winning a single initial match. They drew all 3. But their path to the final from that point on, it ranks as the 3rd hardest in history. Why? Because to advance, they had to survive a second group stage containing both the South American powerhouses of Argentina and Brazil. The Italian squad arrived in Spain operating under the dark shadow of a massive betting scandal, and now they were staring down the barrel, tasked with stopping the tragic genius himself, Diego Maradona.
Which brings us to the number 23. That is the World Cup record number of fouls committed by Italian defender Claudio Gentile on the Argentinians in a single match. I mean, his primary tactical masterclass was simply not letting Maradona breathe. Through sheer, brute discipline, combined with Dino Zoff's absolute brilliance in goal, and Paolo Rossi suddenly finding his scoring boots, Italy completely turned a national scandal into an incredible 3-time championship.
Moving right along to number 4, we are traveling back to 1966. While the whole world was obsessed with Brazil, a 20-year-old German named Franz Beckenbauer was catching everyone entirely off guard. You know, people love to debate the 1966 final, but the numbers prove England's path to the trophy was an absolute gauntlet. Factually, this was the second strongest tournament in history. Despite this, England played with ruthless efficiency, conceding only a single goal before reaching the final match. And in what's often called the greatest and most thrilling final ever played, Geoff Hurst hammered home a hat trick, securing the 5th hardest path any winner has ever faced. They absolutely proved to the world that football was, in fact, coming home.
Coming in at number 3 is a story that just defies all logic. We are talking about the underdog of all underdogs. This is the West German squad of 1954. This wasn't just a game, guys, it was a literal miracle. This West German team entered the tournament completely made up of amateur players. They didn't even have a professional league back home at the time.
Talk about a terrifying mismatch. On one side, you have the German amateurs. On the other, the magical Magyars of Hungary, who were an unstoppable goal-scoring machine. I mean, they had set a mind-boggling record of 27 goals in just 5 matches, a record that amazingly still stands today. Worse still, they had already completely smashed the West Germans 8-3 in the group stages.
Which makes the timeline of the final, famously known as the Miracle of Bern, so incredibly astounding. After that brutal 8-3 group stage thrashing, the Germans found themselves down 2-0 just 8 minutes into the final. The script was already written, right? Wrong. In a story about sheer human will and never giving up, the Germans fought back. They clawed their way into the game and remarkably scored to win 3-2 in the 84th minute. Statistically, this remains the single hardest path to a title ever recorded. It's literal proof that human will can break the math.
All right, we are down to our final 2. Number 2 takes us into the deafening, terrifying atmosphere of the Maracanã Stadium in 1950. Brazil was so confident they were going to win it all that they actually purpose-built the world's biggest stadium just to host their inevitable victory party.
To put this into perspective, the scale of this mismatch was staggering. Brazil had the ultimate home advantage, 200,000 screaming fans willing them on, and the simple fact that they only needed a draw to secure the championship. Against them stood Uruguay, mathematically ranked as the weakest champion in history based on their initial ELO rating. On paper, they had absolutely zero business winning this match.
But this event became known as the Maracanã. When Brazil scored first, the sheer noise of those 200,000 fans actually shook the stadium. But Uruguay achieved the impossible. Against an actual wall of sound and an elite opponent, they staged one of the biggest upsets in football history. They scored twice in the last 24 minutes of the match, silencing an entire nation in an instant, and claiming their second title completely and utterly against the odds.
And finally, the #1 spot. The undisputed, mathematically proven toughest win in World Cup history by a pretty hefty margin goes to Argentina in 1978. Now, this one isn't just about the football. It is deeply about the context and the incredible crucible the team had to somehow survive.
See, Argentina was playing at home under a dictatorial regime, which added this immense political pressure before they even stepped onto the pitch. And on the field, they had to navigate an absolutely brutal sequence of matches. They survived a group of death, featuring both Italy and France. Then in the second group stage, their backs were against the wall, requiring them to beat Peru by a staggering 4 goals just to advance. And finally, they faced an exhausting extra-time battle against the Dutch, who were still the undisputed total football powerhouse of the decade, before Mario Kempes finally secured the title for them.
Mathematically speaking, 1978 ranks as the strongest tournament ever held. It is the only time in the entire history of the sport that 5 different nations entered the competition with an ELO rating of over 2,000. Argentina literally had to run a gauntlet of elite, historically great opponents from the very first whistle to the very last.
So what does this all mean? Looking at these 5 incredible stories, it really reframes how we think about greatness. As the data shows us, the total story of football isn't just about raw talent. It's not just about the effortless brilliance of a Johan Cruyff or a Lionel Messi. It is fundamentally about the teams that possess the sheer energy and drive to overcome what the math said was impossible. Whether it was a miracle in Switzerland or silencing 200,000 fans in Brazil, these teams showed that the underdog always has a fighting chance, provided they have the incredible discipline to endure the pain.
Which leaves us with one final, very important question for you guys. Did our odd-DR mathematical formula get it right? Does the math actually match your memory? Or was there another World Cup triumph that felt even more fundamentally impossible to you? Let me know what you think, and hey, don't forget to subscribe if you love focused, data-driven explainers like this one. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep questioning the impossible.